The New York Nonprofit Press, the industry standard for nonprofits, is a must-read for over 20,000 New York City and state executives. Those who know the nonprofit world count on the NYNP to deliver breaking news and get messages across into the nonprofit industry. Ads can be placed in our paper, daily emails, or on our website. For more information, visit nynp.biz or email publisher at nynp.biz. The New York Nonprofit Press, serving people who serve people.
Ron Gold from Marketing Works. The name of the show is The Nonprofit Voice. We are sponsored by the New York Nonprofit Press. And today we are lucky enough to have the CEO of MercyFirst. And this past week I took a tour of his campus, and as I said to Jerry before he came on, going to your campus, learning all about what you do and seeing it and getting a feel from is so much better than just going on, without seeing it or knowing all about it. And there's a great history here. I mean, you showed me the cemetery, though we couldn't really see too many of the stones. You told me the story of the Seaford Oyster Bay. I mean, there's a lot of heritage that's part of what you do and where you are. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what you do, tell us how long you've been there, and tell us about MercyFirst, because I was impressed.
Well, good morning to you and to everyone who's out there.
And happy July 4th weekend.
Happy July 4th. So I'm Jerry McCaffery, and I am the president and CEO of MercyFirst. It's an organization that goes back 121 years. It was founded by the Sisters of Mercy, actually in two different locations. One in Brooklyn, where they had an organization that was known as Angel Guardian Home. And it essentially was an orphanage where young children would come to stay until they could be adopted. And then they also opened up a second orphanage in Syosset in 1894, which at the time it was called St. Mary's of the Angels. And, it was essentially staffed by just Sisters of the Mercy. Over the years, things have changed in terms of the services that are needed and who they work with. But I think the mission has remained the same, which is really to care for children in need, children who have been abused and neglected, who have been abandoned, and that has remained essential throughout this 121 years.
But you showed me where the nuns live and said they're really not that many left working there. I mean, so the whole focus seems to be away from the sisters and more to you.
Yeah, I mean, I give the Sisters of Mercy a lot of credit. Their average age is in the mid-70s. And, I think while they are very focused on their mission and, they have an incredible history, I think things are changing, and they realize that, not as many people as before are entering the religious orders, whether that's the priesthood or to become a nun. And so they really have just been very honest with their different ministries, which is we're one of them. They also run a number of schools and other social service agencies. And they just had been very honest about, they would like to have these ministries continue long after they're no longer here.
Well, you talk about this as being a school. Were they the teachers at one time?
Yeah, they did everything. On our campus, when we walked around, there's still an old building that was, the original farmhouse when the sisters bought it from a family back in 1894. And that was the agency at the time on the campus. So they would have 60 kids who would live there, one nun per 20 kids, as they would point out, and they were the staff. And, I think they remained essentially the majority of the staff up until, I would say, starting in the late 60s. And at that point, they started to contract with public agencies like Nassau and Suffolk Department of Social Services or the City of New York to care for kids who were coming into foster care. And that's when they began to hire more lay people.
Did they start the Brooklyn campus at the same time, or was it always just the area that we were in?
Brooklyn actually started in 1899, and the building stands. We use it as the main office for our family foster care program. So, besides the campus, we also have a very large family foster care program in Brooklyn, Queens, and also in Suffolk County. So we have, as we speak today, just over 500 children who are in foster families. being cared for. So these are families, everyday families in the community who are recruited and trained and then licensed by the state, but through MercyFirst to serve as foster parents.
Well, tell me about you and how you got involved with MercyFirst and your background.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, at least I tell people, is as a kid, I was born in the Bronx. I lived there until I was about 13. And I went to parochial school like a lot of kids back in the 50s into 60s. And I had the Sisters of Mercy as my teachers.
Oh, wow.
Which is, yeah. So you never know where things are going to go, where life is going to take you. And I never thought that I would ever be back involved with the Sisters of Mercy. But I joined MercyFirst as a CEO just about 10 years ago. But I've been doing this work in, what foster care is kind of called child welfare services. So I've been doing this work now for, almost 35 years.
Well, let's talk about how they get placed. I mean, there's a number of, whether it's government offices that put the kids through you, and we also talked about teenagers coming from the courts. I mean, what is the bulk of the students that you get or the children that you get?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of kids who come to us are kids who are in foster care. So I think everyone can relate to probably reading some tragic story on the front page of the Daily News or Newsday about kids who have just been abused by a parent, and the local state or the local county department called Child Protective Services is the one that gets called in, whether that's by the police department or a neighbor or a teacher who sees bruises on a kid. It can happen any number of ways. And they're the ones that really conduct the initial investigation. And they can decide then or a little bit later that the child is not safe remaining with their family. And at that point, they would remove the child from the home. That's usually done with a court order from family court and placed into foster care. The younger you are, the more likely you're going to be with a foster family. The more that you are, 12 years old and older, still possible of going to a foster family, but you could end up in a group home, which we also operate, or if you have some more serious emotional and physical needs, could end up being placed on our campus, which is much more inclusive and very comprehensive. And, we provide everything from A to Z 24/7.
Well, you have a school on campus, so
we do.
Tell us about the school.
Yeah, so the kids are on campus. So we have a maximum of 116 teenagers who reside with us. It's co-ed. We went co-ed in 2010. Otherwise, we used to just care for boys on campus. But, there's as much of a need for these kind of services for girls as there are for boys. And so we do have a school on our campus run through the New York City Department of Education that was set up going on almost 30 years ago by a sister who was running the agency at that point because they had a large number of kids from the city. How she did it, I don't know. Nuns work in strange and mysterious ways, but she did get the city to open up a school on campus. And so all the teachers work for New York City Department of Education. And all the kids, regardless of whether they're from Nassau or Suffolk, attend that school.
So were they bussed in from New York City and Queens and Brooklyn or to go to you? Or is
the campus school is strictly for the kids who reside on campus with us. So it's just for the kids who are living there on our Syosset campus.
Well, when we visited it the other day, we also saw children from Central America, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is something that we started. Now we're probably going into our second year of providing this service. I think last summer everybody saw the headlines in newspapers and the pictures on television of just thousands of young children from Central America, not Mexico, but Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, who left their home community, crossed through Mexico, came to our southern border seeking refuge. And these are kids, for the most part, whose families, parent, mother, father, could be both, had already moved to the United States for economic reasons to work. And the economies in Central America are, in pretty bad shape. And there are also countries that are really racked by drugs and gang violence. Honduras has the highest murder rate of any country in the world, mostly related to gangs. And so the United States back in 2008 ended up passing a law that allowed for these children, if they came to our borders, to be given a chance to possibly apply for refugee status. And, we tend to hear about that more like in the Middle East where, whether it's, in Lebanon or Syria, which is kind of hit by civil war and ISIS and all crazy stuff where people leave those areas and go to stay in, even in Europe. They've been in Italy and you name it. For us, we're kind of separated from all that stuff, except for way down in Central America, same kinds of issues that families face in some countries in the Middle East, they face. So there were thousands of kids who came to the border. They were taken into custody by United States Department of Homeland Security and then transferred to another federal agency, Office of Refugee Resettlement, which has been doing work, since before the Vietnam War, when we had Vietnamese refugees and Cambodian refugees come to this country because of the war taking place in Southeast Asia. So kind of a history to that. And so we had gotten a federal grant about 2 years ago to provide shelter for these kids until we could work with the feds and the family to find out, where is the family? Is it safe for this youngster to be reunited with them? So we have up to 36 kids who are with us at any given time, who are very young. We probably have gone as young as 6 years old.
Wow.
And they can't be 18, so up to 16, 17 years of age.
You're listening to the Nonprofit Voice. This is Ron Gold from Marketing Works, and we are with Jerry McCaffery, who's the CEO of MercyFirst. You had also mentioned something to me about these kids that you would expect that their families are on Long Island, but they're not. They are all over the country in the Midwest, and that was the interesting part.
I mean, one would think that everything would happen in a more planned way, but it doesn't. Long Island, in some communities in Suffolk County, Freeport, we have one of the highest numbers of families from Central America in the country. And I don't think anyone who lives on Long Island would be surprised by that.
No.
But when these kids come to the southern border, the feds don't necessarily ask, where's your parents? Oh, Long Island? Okay, we'll send you to MercyFirst. Instead, what happens is, we got 20 beds in California. One, 2, 3, they count 20. They're on the next plane. They get shipped to California, and then it gets sorted out once they're there. So last year, we had close to about 300 children who came to us between May through September, and less than 5% of them were with families or could have been reunited with families who were on Long Island. Everyone else, went to California, the Midwest, Ohio, you name it, all over the place.
Then what about the ones who come to your school? I mean, when I was visiting the other day, there was a class full of children. Now, those are children that their families are here on Long Island? Or
no, those are youngsters who've been placed with us. They're from Central America. And while they're with us, while we're still figuring out with the federal government where their family is and how safe that is, because the worst thing you want to do is have a child that maybe was trying to get away from trafficking of some sorts in Honduras, to end up coming to the United States and go with a supposed relative who ends up doing the very same thing.
Right.
So there has to be home studies done to check the home, make sure that things are safe and that the child can go there. But in the meantime, and they're with us for, I would say, it ranges, but averages about 30 days. But in the time that they're waiting for that stuff to happen, they go to school on our grounds. It's not through the New York City Department of Education, though they do provide some resources for us. But part of our federal grant allows us to have teachers who are on our staff who work with those kids. Our teachers are bilingual, so they speak English and Spanish. But I would say that these kids are just hungry to go to school, to learn English, to, a lot of them are just so kind of almost relieved if anyone has, watched any of the programs around about what these kids go through to go from their country through Mexico, through gangs, riding the tops of freight trains all the way up to the southern border. Sometimes they try it 3, 4, 5 times before they're successful to get to the border. Go through amazing hardship to make it. So these are kids. I mean, when I've talked to some of our neighbors who, some folks get very upset at, immigrants and illegal immigrants, and I remind them that these kids are here through the possibility of, a federal law that allows their case to be heard. But what I see in these kids is what has made this country great. I think of, I don't know about you, but many of our listeners, my grandparents on both sides of my family came from Ireland.
Mine, Russia.
Russia. They all came to escape, a lot of hardship and lack of opportunity. And, and they are some of the hardest working people you could ever have.
But when we talk about the immigrants, we also talk about teenagers, and that's another program. So there's a lot of elements of MercyFirst, and we'll get into it, but talk about the teenagers, and you have them from the courts, right?
Yes.
That assign them to you.
So we have a number of, on our campus, a number of teenagers who are placed with us through family court, who are, juvenile delinquents, so they've done something wrong, illegal, but they've not done anything that kind of has put, anyone else at risk. And so rather than lock these kids up, which is a surefire way to make sure that the kid will just, never have an opportunity to kind of turn their life around, they're with us where they receive, a wide range of services and treatment, holding them accountable for things that they do, but trying to expose them to another way of going through life, getting back into education, succeeding in that, starting to build relationships with adults and peers. And
how long do they stay with you? I mean, do they stay in your programs for a long time, or they reach a certain plateau and they can go back into the mainstream? Or
it kind of really varies with every youngster.
And they're watched, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of supervision, but through all our programs, whether it's family foster care, where we have the 500 plus kids, or on campus where we have about 116 kids, and then we have 10 group homes in the community where we have about 75 kids who reside with us in different locations in Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk. We have a lot of kids that move through our different programs depending upon their needs. Obviously, you can only be on our campus if you're at least 12 years old. So, we have infants in our care and family foster care who, for the most part, will never see our campus. Most kids who come into foster care, a little over 70%, end up going home at some point. So, our kids, hopefully most of the kids on campus are there for about 8 to 10 months. And then we kind of really focus on trying to stabilize them, get them into school, working with their families. For some, they go back home after they've been with us. Others might step back down into a foster family or could transfer to our group home. So it depends on what they need, what resources are available. But our whole thrust really is to stabilize the youngster and then try to seek a more permanent setting for them. Our campus it's a very artificial environment. It's not the way the world
when we
works.
walked around. I mean, there was a big softball game going on. You have a gigantic basketball court. I mean, everything about it was so, it's such a great place for anyone to,
Yeah, it's
go
a
to
beautiful
school
campus. It really is. I mean, it looks like a private school in many ways. And we put a lot of resources into the environment because that sends a message to our kids in terms of that we care about them, that we want them to be in a good place to grow up. And so we try to keep them busy like every parent does with their own teens, but there's a lot of therapeutic services that also are provided with counseling and therapy, and we have a whole bunch of other things. You met one of our art therapists, our director of that program.
Absolutely, and I do want to talk about your staff, but let's...
Yeah.
How many people work for you? Tell me about your staff. There's a lot of people that we met that have been there for an eternity.
Yes.
And we find that in a lot of places that we work with in the nonprofit industry, that people do stay a long time.
Yeah. I mean, people who come to work for us, even, so we have a fiscal department. I mean, we have, 20-something staff that work in that department that do a lot of the billing that, we have contracts with different counties, state agencies that we have to bill for. No one just kind of turns around and gives you a check. There's a lot of work that goes into doing that. But these are people who could work in any business anywhere, but really want to do work that kind of means something for them. So all our staff, regardless of where they work, whether directly with kids or fiscal department or HR, IT, these are very mission-driven people. They want to spend their time doing something that is, giving something back to the community.
And they have a smile on their face. I mean, you could see that when they're working, whether they were in the cafeteria or they were working with the kids out while the softball game was going on, and somebody came up to them and said, I'm only a student here, but I also oversee it, which was great to hear both sides of it.
I mean, almost all our staff are people that will see a half glass of water as half full rather than half empty. I think you have to have that kind of attitude to do this kind of work. But we have a little over 600 employees that work out of 15 different locations. And so, all our residential programs are operating 24/7. We also have almost 300 foster parents who we license and work with, who kind of work with more of our younger kids. So it's a lot of moving parts that are going on as we speak at this time in the morning.
Well, that's great. I am going to take a break, at this point, and we will come back and do the second half of our show. You're listening to The Nonprofit Voice. I'm Ron Gold from Marketing Works, and we're here with Jerry McCaffery, who is the CEO of MercyFirst.
The New York Nonprofit Press, the industry standard for nonprofits, is a must-read for over 20,000 New York City and state executives. Those who know the nonprofit world count on the NYNP to deliver breaking news and get messages across into the nonprofit industry. Ads can be placed in our paper, daily emails, or on our website. For more information, visit nynp.biz or email publisher at nynp.biz. The New York Nonprofit Press, serving people who serve people.
Good morning. This is Ron Gold. I'm with Jerry McCaffery from MercyFirst, and we were just talking about his staff. So why don't you continue that conversation? How many people work for you? Where are the majority of the people that work for you?
Yeah, we have, as we speak, we have a little over 600 employees that work out of 15 locations. Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk. So we have a number of sites, some residential programs, office locations in each of those 4 boroughs. And we still have today, we have 3 sisters who work for us. They're all based in Brooklyn, but they serve some different functions with us. So we've gone from an agency where everybody who was doing the work were the sisters to now where, we still have a very active presence from them, but it kind of is a good indicator of, how the times have changed.
Well, you have a lot of different programs between the immigration program that you have, between the teenagers, between foster care. How do you put this? What do people know you as? They know you as foster care, I think. Because
I would say so. Yeah, we're kind of viewed as a very comprehensive agency that provides some very specialized and difficult services. Nobody is looking to open up new programs like this anymore. One is, like our campus. We have a 50-acre campus in Syosset. You couldn't afford to buy something like that these days. So, the sisters bought it for $7,500 back in 1894. They had a suitcase full of cash, as they tell me, that they came out with to buy it. But, so what we do is, I think it's kind of, we're not the only ones that do it, but it is rather unique, but it's also very demanding work. It's very difficult.
And is the agency growing? In comparison, there's more people that are part of it now, more staff.
Yeah, we've gone through our ups and downs. I think the economy over the last couple of years, and there's always changes in public policy about how public agencies, the government wants to do things. Back 20 years ago, when I was heading up an agency in New York City, there were 50,000 kids in foster care.
Wow.
Just way too many kids. Some kids that didn't really need to be there. Now, and that was just New York City. Today, there's a little over 11,000 kids in foster care. So it's a major difference. So there's a lot of services. We also do what's called preventive services. So we work with families in Brooklyn where there has been a child abuse investigation, but a determination made that, if the mom got some help and they could keep some eyes on what was going on in the home, that maybe the kids could stay with their family rather than coming into foster care. Because we can, and I can get very excited about this stuff because I think we run a great agency and we have some very committed staff. But, some people can, you kind of almost like romanticize what we do, and there's nothing romantic about it. It's very, I think of when I was a kid and I moved from the Bronx to Long Island. I still remember that day standing on the corner saying, where am I? And I was still with my family. So you can imagine a kid, 5, 6, 8, 15 years of age, who one day is with their family, and the next day they've been removed by, with police involved and you name it, and they're with some family who they have no idea who they are. It's incredibly traumatic.
Oh,
and,
my God.
That is something, even if nothing else happened with that kid, will stick with them for the rest of their life.
And they move around, so they don't even stay with one family.
Right.
So they don't get to know them like we did growing up.
Some kids, could end up going to a foster family and stay with them until they eventually go home or get adopted. We do about 50 adoptions a year of kids who cannot go back home to their family and who are adopted 99% of the time by their foster parents. But yeah, you have other kids where something changes with the foster family. They're going to move out of state. They're moving down to be with their family in Florida. Or the youngster, presents certain behavioral problems, emotional issues that the foster family just can't deal with. Or the foster father gets sick and the foster mother's attention has to turn entirely on him and can't be caring. So there's lots of reasons why kids end up going from one foster home to another, which makes that trauma even more so.
Well, you talk about the agencies that really support you and they fund you, but the funding has to be down because government funding is a lot more difficult to get right now than it ever has been, which forces you to do more fundraising. Right. So let's talk about your fundraising efforts. I see you have something at Yankee Stadium you're promoting now, but I don't think that's your big promotion.
No, that's kind of a giveaway to, we don't make any money on that. We have a deal with the Yankees for a game coming up in August, and anyone listening, if you're a Yankee fan, I know there's a lot more Mets fans on Long Island, but I am a diehard Yankee fan. If anyone would like to, they can go to our website. They'll see a promotion where they can get Yankee tickets, really good tickets, very cheap. We don't make anything of it. We just do it to kind of thank people who have been supportive of us over
and that's
the years.
Because you're from the Bronx.
I would like to think so. I'd like to think me and Mickey Mantle were like this, but
I loved Mickey Mantle growing up.
He was the guy when I was a kid too, right?
Yeah, that's great.
But we do have a number of special events that we hold during the course of the year. In May, we have a big golf outing.
You're at 2 golf courses, which is great. So you have some event. Tell us about this year's.
So the last couple of years, we've done it both at the Creek and Tam O'Shanter. They're up on North Shore, Old Brookville. Beautiful. Both of them are beautiful courses. We sell out both of them.
It's amazing.
And crazy golfers. They really are quite a bunch. And we have guys who have been, and women who have been doing this now with us for 15 years, rain or shine. They fly in from other parts of the country. Some of that is because of our board members who they know through work or.
It usually is the board members that do it.
they're the ones. It's not me because I'm not a golfer. So that's a big event for us.
Absolutely.
And then we also have an event. We used to do it in the Garden City Hotel. Did it for many years. And then last year, we just decided we wanted to change it up, and we moved it to a place in Tribeca. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was, and we changed the name, and so now it's the Angel of Hope reception, a lot more casual. And it's a wonderful setting. You see all of Lower Manhattan. That's coming up in November, early November.
Well, that's unusual because of an agency like yours that is in Long Island, even though it is in Brooklyn also.
Right.
To do an event in Manhattan, would you be better off being on Long Island?
Yeah, we found we have a lot of people who work in the city many of whom live on Long Island. Most of my board members work in the city, and they live on Long Island. And coming out to an event that starts at 6:30 at night in the Garden City Hotel on a Thursday evening is
wow. It's like today.
like today. So the logistics of it makes it very difficult. So last year, we, working with our fundraising committee, opted to change it up. So first one we did last year, we actually honored one of our board members, Kevin Shine, who's been just terrific. He actually was adopted through our agency going back 50 some odd years ago.
That's great.
Which is an incredible story. Wonderful guy who really has his heart in behind the agency and everything that we do. And and the good news is that he's not alone. We have a lot of great board members who do that and often do all this on their time, which is terrific.
You have a fundraising committee that's part of the board, so the board is very active. We've seen a lot of different boards where they started the agency 25 years ago or 30 years ago. They're still there, and they don't want to let anybody in there.
They run out of steam.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we went through. I've been at MercyFirst now for about 10 years, and I would say we were just like what you described. And I think there was a recognition, though, that it was not working. And so we went through a major review. We actually worked with the Delphi University, their Center for Nonprofit Leadership.
Right.
And Ann Thigpen was very helpful with us. And,
she's great. Yeah.
She's great. So we spent a full day at a board retreat, kind of revisiting roles, issues around governance, and we did a whole turnaround. A number of people left the board who were not happy with the change, but I think it reinvigorated everyone who was there, and we've since then brought on a lot more new board members. We have high attendance at board meetings. We have a very active committee structure: finance, governance, audit, fundraising, mission, which is kind of our program committee that meets on a regular, ongoing basis. So,
wow.
The board meets 6 times a year, but in between that are many committee meetings that go on all the time. So it's a lot of work that goes into an organization like us, like most nonprofits.
So they're the development staff also, right? You don't have a development person per se. They're the ones that run the events for you?
Yeah, I have a woman, Carrie Sneeden, who's my vice president for resource development. So she oversees our fundraising efforts. She has somebody on staff who helps us with foundation proposals, also a lot of our marketing tools and stuff. I know we have actually a nun, one of the nuns who works for us, Sister Margaret, who she'd be worth spending another hour with talking, because she's really quite a find. She's been with us now for a little over a year, but she was connected with the agency for many years. But she's terrific. She's our point person. We probably get 20 inquiries a month from people who either had been adopted through our agency, or whose parent had been adopted, or something along those lines, who want to find out more about what got them to MercyFirst. For most of them, I would say, what got them to Angel Guardian, which was one of our predecessor agencies.
Do you want to talk about any other special events that you're doing?
We do. I think we do some great program events, which are really, for us, I think it's kind of the highlight of the year when they take place. We just had a scholarship dinner. It was actually our 7th scholarship dinner. So we have a program in the agency called Bridges to the Future. And what that does is it mostly works with our older kids, our teens. And, I always tend to use the analogy that, it's easier to work with kittens than cats. So when you have a young baby that comes into foster care, you have foster parents clamoring to, I'll care for them, I'll care for them. But a teenager, that's somebody who's got some issues. We have some foster parents who will only take teenagers. God bless them.
Wow.
But, even if you have your own teenagers, that's that's not easy. If you've done everything right, your teen is going to give you trouble. That's like their job description.
The problems get bigger when they get older.
Yeah, and there's nothing that you can do is right. And then, when they get into their 20s, then they come around and realize how smart you've become in the last few years. But so for us, is what we've done with our older teens is realize that we need to do more for them, because many of them are not going to go back home. Many of them are going to leave us and move out into independent living. So we have...
Well, they have to at 18, you said, right?
No, they can actually be with us till 21.
Till 21.
As long as they're in school or some kind of vocational training program. So we do have a number of kids who where that's the case. But, we've worked with, in fact, we work with one of your clients that you work with, Free, which is an organization here on Long Island.
They're great, yeah.
They're terrific. And they've extended to us, the kids on our campus, kind of doing an introduction to the world of work. So our kids end up, learning to do interviews and resumes, and then they end up working at Free. And it's been a terrific experience. And it's good that they get that from somebody other than MercyFirst, so that it reinforces the fact that this is how the world works. So it's been a great positive experience for them.
You're listening to the Nonprofit Voice. This is Ron Gold from Marketing Works, and we're here with Jerry McCaffery from MercyFirst. And one of the things that I was very interested in was the dog therapy.
Ah, yes.
Because we have Labradoodles. And I could see a lot of Labradors there.
Right. Yeah, so we've been doing this now for probably going on 15 years, where we have about 5 therapy dogs. These are dogs who have been trained to be therapy dogs. So they, when you talk about, golden retrievers to begin with, or Labradors, they are incredibly personable with people, and these dogs even more so. So we use these dogs in a therapeutic way with our kids. A new kid could be coming to us, being placed with us, a lot of change happening, and you're trying to talk with them about, getting them to understand what's going on, settle down and relax, and all that's nice and good. But what's a lot more effective is a dog who comes in and sticks his head on the kid's lap and wagging his tail, and just those kind of, wet, moist eyes looking up at the kid's face, and before you know it, the kid is petting the dog and kind of, feeling a little more relaxed and cooled out. And so
they do that. Yeah.
They do that. And, dogs have an incredible way of knowing what you need and what you're going through, and how they can kind of just help you feel better. So we have 4 or 5 dogs, and our kids learn to work with them. And we take in abandoned dogs, actually from a local shelter on Long Island. These are dogs that, had been with a family, and for whatever reason, they were too much energy or behavior problems, or maybe the family never knew what it meant to have a puppy in their house. And so they ended up being, turned over to a shelter. We will take in those dogs, and the kids will work with our therapy dogs to socialize them. And then we'll have one of our staff kind of serve as like a foster parent. So at the end of the day, they will take this dog home with them and then bring it back the next day.
And they always bring it back, right?
They always bring it back. Eventually, they end up owning them.
Yeah.
But the dogs continue to come to our campus as part of the dog therapy program.
Well, let's talk about art therapy. You gave me a list of things that we should talk about. We're not even going to touch it, so I'm going to have to bring you back again for another show. But let's talk about art therapy, because the most interesting part of the campus when I got the tour was looking up and seeing everything up on the tiles, which was incredible. I'm not used to seeing that. So,
yeah, we probably going back now 3 to 4 years ago, we were looking to kind of enhance what we were doing with kids. A lot of our kids who have been abused, neglected, they have almost an impossible way of trying to explain what they're feeling, how they're feeling. They're kind of lost for words, but they have a tremendous amount of anger and angst inside them that you have to find a way to get that out. Otherwise, they're never going to be able to make progress. And so when we were trying to think of what was some ways of doing that, I ended up getting a colleague of mine who sent me a resume of a woman who was an art therapist, and they had closed their program, but she lived on Long Island, and he said, hey, maybe this is something that can help you out. So Eileen McCann is our director of creative therapies on our campus, and she was just a tremendous find. So she's been able to pull in students from a number of different colleges and university, people who also want to train to be art therapists. And we have now incorporated that within several different programs on campus, as well as some of our group homes. So it's a way of having a kid be able to learn how to express themselves.
Do they do the murals also? Was that the ones who did that?
They've done murals in different parts on the campus, a handball court. The kids designed it. We have a big wall in our cafeteria, which is turned into a chalkboard once a month. There's a different theme where the kids, kind of find a way of expressing whatever the theme is. And, I mean, when we were walking around, she was showing, some of the masks that some of the kids make.
Oh, that's some story with that first mask.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, I mean, when we were there, she kind of showed this mask of a youngster who had really been through a horrible abuse, neglect within their family and could not talk to people. He kind of had this self-imposed silence. He just wouldn't talk to anyone, didn't trust anybody. And when you think of what he's been through, I don't blame him. No adult that had been in his life had done anything that warranted his trusting them. Everyone that had come in his life had just been abusive and you name it. And so she began to work with him, and she'll go with whatever works. And he began to, she suggested he's doing a mask. I mean, you saw the mask. I mean, it just looked like anger personified.
So mental health is a big part of what you do too.
Absolutely. We have clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists. We have a large psychology intern program within our family foster care and group home and campus programs. So these are folks who are training to become licensed psychologists. They're with us for a year while they learn, some hands-on practical experience. And so there's a wide range of therapeutic interventions, everyday things like the softball game that we saw.
Well, that was great.
Yeah, and so it's just everyday things that kids do, as well as therapeutic interventions to try to make the most of their time with us, to get them stabilized and feel safe and be ready to take the next step on their journey.
Well, as we try to get everything in about what you do, let's talk about mothers and babies.
Oh, mothers and babies, yeah. We do have, it is a population that goes back to our beginnings. When the Sisters of Mercy, they first began to take in babies that were abandoned on their stoop. And now what we have is we probably have close to 30 teen moms in our care with their babies. Some of them are we have group homes in the community. We have one in Brooklyn, 2 in Queens, another one in Suffolk County. So these are teenagers, teen girls who have been in foster care, who got pregnant, who opted to go ahead and go through with the pregnancy, have their baby. But these are teens who have a hard enough time learning what to do as a teenager, never mind now being a mother at 16, 15 years of age. So we, when they are with us, they go to school. Our staff care for their baby when they're in school, but they learn how to become both a responsible teenager as well as a good parent in the time that they're with us.
In the last minute and a half that we have left, tell us what your vision is for the future for MercyFirst.
I think what we want to do is kind of continue to strengthen the services we provide, recognizing that, somebody says to me all the time, like, the kids, they're not the same today than they were yesterday. I mean, that's true about anything in life. The kind of issues we all deal with in our family or traffic on the road, nothing gets easier. Everything gets more complicated. And so for us, I think the challenge is how do we continue to provide the services that make a difference in the lives of the kids who come to us, and to really be as creative as we can, and to get as much support we can from the community to be able to do those things.
Well, I was very impressed with how we walked around, with the way you showed everybody. I was there with Mary Beth, and the pride that you have in your job just is so engulfing to people there. Every one of the staff that saw you, they didn't hide.
Right.
Here comes that CEO again. It was
Mr. Jerry. Hey, Mr. Jerry.
Here you are. Tell us more about what you do. It was really something. I really, really liked going around with you. And I really want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And I hope we could do this again, pretty soon. And I want to learn more and more. And you gave me a whole list of things to cover, and I know I didn't make it through half of what we had to do. You're listening to The Nonprofit Voice. This is Ron Gold. If you would like to be a guest on the show, you could email us at ron@marketingworkspr.com. The website is thenonprofitvoice.com. And we're on every Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. So thank you and have a good day today.